On the battlefield in Yemen, there has been a decisive shift in recent days. It's just not anything because Yemen is a country with access to strategic routes for the transfer of oil, which also has energy resources, and we're talking about an actor that could generate a break in the alliances. At the same time, the outcome of the war could leave on the battlefield a rearrangement of the energy map of the region. Now, where do we find the reasons for this? United Arab Emirates gets in a fight with its partner Saudi Arabia and with the extra regional ally as United States, and has preferred to approach Russia? Are the questions that come from all over the world over the war that is destroying the population of a country no longer acceptable? Is there an underlying pact with Iran, or rather the consideration that because they will be an immediate coastal neighbor and there is an increasing talk of the possibility of a war confrontation with the United States, has the United Arab Emirates added up the numbers and they just don't add up? Or is it the admission, without saying it, of a defeat? This is what we're going to be deciphering today. Let's see what's the analysis we can come up with. We will get more information with guests and overall with your critical thinking. Let's start. Let's start with news. Last week, the confrontation began to withdraw all of their weapons, tanks, attack helicopters, and heavy weapons. This is said to be happening after a year of discussions with Riyadh and the rest of coalition countries that have been bombarding the poorest country in the Arab world since March 2015. Abu Dhabi already reduced last month its deployment in the strategic port of Al Udeid in the Red Sea by 80% to less than 150 soldiers. And let's see, the New York Times published last Thursday a report which reads, "The retreat is a late acknowledgement that the unpopular four-year war has claimed thousands of lives and has caused the worst crisis can no longer be won. The Emirates are motivated mainly by their desire to get out of the war, whose cost has become too high, even if it means angering their Saudi allies." There's a vision, there's part of all of the questions, all of the answers. The Houthis attribute their capacities for resistance and the retreat they have launched to bomb targets against the country. How are things inside the country? The members of an NGO, Matuana, for human rights, denounces the following. Famine is imminent, civilians cannot move freely, and aid is obstructed. Let's listen to one of the spokesperson, Christine Beckler. It is important that the Saudis and Emiratis adopt a change in their targeting practices that will help minimize harm to civilians. It is important that the Saudis and the Emiratis actually conduct reliable investigation, which really provide reparations to civilians. These are things that they could do and stop the sale of weapons and say, we will not continue to sell weapons until you stop the illegal attacks. Investigate in a credible manner, hold potential war criminals accountable, and provide civil reparations. It is a direct tool to help try and to give concrete steps that would have an impact on civil life during the conflict and ideally push them to end this war. Now let's go to the let's go to the map. Yemen, their relevance is done by it's a bicontinental country. It is in Asia and Africa at the same time. The Asian part is on the south of the Arabian Peninsula, with the Red Sea around it. With 152 square kilometers, it's the second country in the peninsula, and it borders with the Saudi Arabia to the north and the Oman to the east. It has the islands of Socotra, World Heritage in 2008, due to the biodiversity of almost 700 species. This relevance also is given by one of the oldest centers of civilization in the Near East, and it has oil fields and that generate like 25% of the GDP and 63% of the state revenue. It also administers the Asian Bank of the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb for sea passage of oil. The capital and most populated city is Sana'a, and it emerged in 1990 after the reunification of North and South Yemen. North Yemen is formed by the partition of the Ottoman Empire. South Yemen is born from the end of the British colonialism. The degradation of the war began in 2015. Saudi Arabia armed coalition with the objective to bombard. There were criminal against people and infrastructure that still now, 4 years later, have not stopped. Their objective to put in its place the ousted U.S. allied government, to end with the Shiite rebels deemed as Iranians' middlemen. There was a report of the Washington Post said that there's over 50,000 dead people, and UN warns that worse humanitarian crises are in hunger and major cholera epidemic.
Puerto clave de Yemen y principal entrada de importaciones y ayuda humanitaria. Por si fuera poco, este país degradado por la guerra sufre la peor epidemia de cólera del mundo.
Cholera epidemic. These are things now. Does oil explain everything? Not necessarily, because without a doubt there are other factors. But when it comes to oil issues, there is something else to add that we hardly mentioned in the previous map. The Strait of Bab al-Mandeb, the African riverbank, belongs to the Eritrean and Djibouti, but the Asian to Yemen. Let's locate it too. Narrow of Bab al-Mandeb, narrow sea passage that links the Red Sea to the north with the Gulf of Aden to the south in the Indian Ocean. It is estimated that about 5 million barrels of oil pass per day. This is like 10% of the total oil crude that moves daily, and 40% that is consumed of Europe. Most of the oil circulates through this channel of Suez, passes first through the Bab el-Mandeb. So it's a cardinal sea track. An eventual closure or collapse would mean the bordering of Cape of Hope, which would make it much more expensive. Faced with a possible closure of the Strait of Hormuz, controlled by Iran, Bab al-Mandeb acquires even a greater importance. Hence, Saudi Arabia projects an oil pipeline from its large deposits in the east through the Yemeni region of Aramaut, which ends in Atadem. In this way, it would be able to avoid the passage of the freighters through Hormuz. Very close to Bab al-Mandeb, United States, France, Italy, and Japan have military bases. The biggest is the American Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, with more than 4,000 uniformed soldiers. Did you see how interesting? We're going to keep all of these information in our minds, and then we will ask our guests. Let's go to Shiwa Agency. This is of July 15th, like 48 hours. They say that the Yemen rebels have attacked Yemen. And what it says is that the Houthi rebels keep on attacking, although the Saudi attacks are even worse now. This was an attack with drones at a large scale, and their objective was a weapons deposit and other military units This was said by the Houthi spokesperson. They happened this Sunday, just an hour after the peace conversation that lasted 2 days and sponsored by United Nations, by Houthis that were held by both parts. Both parties were about to start a negotiation of retrieving the military forces.
Que de una vez por todas comience a llegar la ayuda humanitaria que necesita la población.
Let's go now to Voltaire. They said on February 16, 2018, they said now to a new division of Yemen. And this is important to understand the interests of the United Arab Emirates in the region. It says members want the creation of a new state that could allow the control over Aden. Right now it's being exploited by a company called Dubai Ports World. This is what the report says. And it says that by favoring the division of Yemen, United Arab Emirates goes to the other side. It just shifts its interests. This would be a defeat of the Yemeni president. And this would go all beyond what they originally had said. And it said the new Yemeni state would be created in the territories of what used to be South Yemen, and later became the Democratic Republic of Yemen before the reunification. This is a very interesting information that we could ask our analysts. Or is it that it's a strategy of Saudi Arabia to get out of this war, because the war is too expensive for them? There's another article of Hispan TV that we would like to review, that we would like to recommend. It's on July 9th of 2019. It's called Yemen, Vietnam, Arab Vietnam, and Riyadh wants to get out.
Sede en Reino Unido, cuyo título es
The title is
Saud comenzaron a buscar el fin de la guerra de Yemen.
Why are they looking for the end of the Yemeni war? It says the syndrome of Vietnam 40 years later has passed from the Asian to the desert of. However, it's believed that the light at the end of the tunnel is not so close. However, nothing is definite yet. At the bottom, there's another piece of information that says they've not been able to fight against the Yemen military strength. So they want a graceful way out of this. There's apparently they want to flee this war. And this article recalls the beginning in 2017 in Yemen of the war. From Damascus, we have Hisham Wanous. Welcome, greetings. In fact, last week, after a year of discussions with Riyadh, the rest of the countries of the coalition, led by Saudi Arabia, that has been bombarding Yemen since 2015, the United Arab Emirates has started to withdraw their military forces. It has been announced that they have many people, many soldiers that they're withdrawing from this city on the the Red Sea. In this way, we see that the forces have left their base 130 kilometers to the south of Al-Aden. Abu Dhabi also withdrew their heavy weapons and helicopters. Saudi Arabia is mad at this action. And there has been an attempt to stop this withdrawal, but nothing was gained. And this is done because of all of the international criticism due to all of the victims. So all of the support that this country gives to the U.S. is not enough for the U.S. to protect them. And this is just a product of the 4-year war that has created the worst crisis. And apparently this war is not something that they can win. So apparently they just want to get out of this war because the cost is too high. And they want to avoid an attack by Tehran due to the escalation of the tensions of the U.S. and Iran. Another reason is the suspension of selling weapons. So United Arab Emirates tries to improve their public image in the world. And of course this war is just a fiasco. With these actions, the differences with Saudi Arabia will be even bigger. Last week, it began when the country did not attack Iran for the attacks on the oil carriers in the Hormuz Strait. The withdrawal is just an evidence of the defeat. However, this was the attack on the poorest country of the Middle East. However, the division of Yemen has many interests behind it, basically because of the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb that connect the Middle East with the Mediterranean and through which 5 million barrels a day circulate. Let's go back to studios. Thank you, Hisham. And for tactic reasons, they said that they're withdrawing partially their weapons against Yemen. How should we interpret this? Let's go to the considerations of our guests. Is this a dissuasive strategy? Is this a rupture? Is this a change of the alliances? We're going to analyze this with our guests. We'll be right back after a pause. Don't go anywhere. We ask ourselves before going to a pause, how could we interpret this announcement of United Arab Emirates of withdrawing their troops in the war against Yemen? Is this a rupture with the alliance of Saudi Arabia, or is the United Arab Emirates have already measured all of the implications. So let's go to other two questions. How has this country participated in the war against Yemen, and what are their interests? United Arab Emirates participated in the war against Yemen, providing weapons. It's been a distribution channel of many weapons. Analysts have said that they send it to Yemen. Their interest is the same as Saudi Arabia, is to combat the Houthis that are being supported by Iran. But additionally, the Emirates is interested in the geolocation of Yemen that is just between Asia and Africa and controls a part of the Strait of Al-Mandeb. Originally, they were the allies of the U.S. It is part of an nexus of power with Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. However, Emirates has gone to the countries of Kuwait and Oman, and that prefer negotiation. What does this set? Does it open a new phase in the operations? As I said, the attacks are becoming worse, and the Houthis are defending themselves. And this happens in the midst of the new negotiations. There was a negotiation of the Houthis that there was going to be an agreement that sought to reduce the tensions around the city of Al-Hudaydah. That is a pivotal point for entering of humanitarian aid, and through which 80% of the products come in. There, it was understood that there was going to be a halt, a ceasefire, and there was going to open the doors to negotiate peace discussions that would lead to the end of the conflict that began in 2015. However, this has just been written on paper, because in reality what's happening is what we just listened to the NGO of human rights. And in these past 7 months, the violence has still increased, and many people have been displaced, mostly in the city of Hudaydah, where 26,000 people have been left homeless ever since the signing of this agreement. And children keep on dying due to the explosion of human minds. So victims are innocent children that could receive all of these bombs. Having shown all of this information, let's present our guests. From Argentina, we've got Ernesto Matos. He's an international analyst, and Ángel Molina from the University of Rosario. Thank you to both of my guests. Let's start with Ernesto. We're trying to seek the reasons of this withdrawal of the United Arab Emirates. What is your answer to this? Well, in first place, and as it is well known, there have been some conversations with United Arab Emirates and Iran, which opens the diplomatic relationship once again. And the cost of the country, of the United Arab Emirates, is very high. So now they're rethinking the relationships in the region, and this explains the withdrawal of the Emirates. And of course, it's understood as a defeat, because if the military budgets of all of these countries, we can see that Yemen is a very small budget, whereas the Arab Emirates has has a budget 10 times bigger of that of their enemy. And however, they have not been able to be victorious in these past 4 years. So this makes you rethink of the impact of all of the displaced and refugees, and mainly to Oman. And so you start to think that diplomacy on behalf of Iran is starting to work. Thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Angel. Do you think there's a rethinking of reorganizing of the alliances in the region? Or do you think that there's any other factors that can explain these movements? Without a doubt, what my colleague said is one of the reasons that you have to bear in mind. This alliance that led by Saudi Arabia is not the first time that it starts to reduce little by little. For example, first Kuwait. At the beginning, it was much bigger. It was even going to be with Pakistan. In the case of the United Arab Emirates, is the most human losses of their side. It's like over 200 soldiers on their side. And this is too much of a high cost for them. In 2015, they thought it was going to be, from 2015 on, they thought it was going to be a relatively easy operation. However, it just wasn't. And it's incredible to see how the geostrategic position of this country and the resources has determined all of the actions against it. The aspiration is, I think that the coalition, that it will start to reduce because of all of the costs, both human and economic and political, have been way too high. I would like to ask Ernesto, what are the consequences could this withdrawal have? Such an important actor like United Arab Emirates, in the sense that if Saudi Arabia gets too mad, what could happen? Well, first of all, this divide of the Security Council of the countries that are talking about the attack on Yemen speak of the defeat of Saudi Arabia, and that they had the support of the U.S. This is a defeat that Saudi Arabia is the responsible one. So from here on, we have to see how they're going to react to this regional agreement. And of course, we hope that that we see that there's an end to this war, because of the catastrophe and to everything that implies to the commerce of oil. We're speaking of one of the main areas through which the oil passes to Europe, and it crosses the Atlantic. So we have to see if this doesn't imply for Saudi Arabia to start lowering this conflict, and they would have to start thinking again what to do with this intervention. we have to see that the real discussion with Yemen began with a World Bank proposition to eliminate taxes on fuel. And now Saudi Arabia has to be thinking of how to withdraw and what humanitarian help will they have to provide. What is it that you were suggestion? What was the suggestions of the World Bank for Yemen? Well, the elimination of the subsidies to the fuel that are basic for the economic dynamic of the commerce. And of course, this is what brought the flame. And at the end, it's just part of being a responsible country. We all know that the World Bank is managed by the United States, and that these recommendations are always lead to condemning the countries of the region to be late. Thank you, Ernesto. Let's go back to Ángel. This is a region that everybody has their eye on them. If we see that Iran has a control over the Hormuz Strait, if they decide to close the strait, so what Saudi Arabia is trying to do is controlling Yemen and having the strait, the other strait, maybe they would be able to use this one. It's interesting that you have to keep in mind. If it's Bab el-Mandeb, it's very important because there's an old pipeline that's totally under the town that is going all through Saudi Arabia, that goes directly to the Red Sea. And of course, what it does is avoid the passage through both of the straits. However, there are other interesting topics. This is understood by both sides. So we all have, everybody has an interest in Djibouti. In the case of Yemen, there's something else that has to do with the disputes of hegemony in the region. And of course, in this case, it is supported by the U.S. So they are the only country of the peninsula that is constituted as a republic. So since 1962, it's been of strategic importance for them. Now, there should be some sanctions, not only against Yemen, so they will have an autonomous regulation. And now it's important to also see who is on which side, who are the allies on one side and the other, and who can be at the margin of this conflict. Oman is an example that has proven how you can have excellent relationships with all sides and remain at the margin of these conflicts. Thank you, Ángel. We asked Ernesto about the possibility of the war with Iran. Does this count too? Do you think that beyond everything, this is the war that everybody wants to avoid? Yes, in fact, I think that the discussion in general lines is how we can see the interests of the U.S. in this part of the world. Saudi Arabia was not able to obtain is at the lowering the price of the oil at the worldwide scale. This had also received the support of the U.S. that has to do with Yemen. And now, as we can see, there are two Yemens. One that's more monarchy, and the other one that's there's more democracy in it. So we're right now at a point like Vietnam. And why? Because they were better located. And right now, any friend of Iran is an enemy of the U.S. So what we have is like a chess board where it is important to define who are your allies and who are the allies of your enemy. The European Union is trying to find the peace through diplomacy, and the United States, that whenever they want, they will get you out of the SWIFT system, or on the contrary, they'll just control the internet information. So this is what's happening in the region. Thank you very much for the time you've given Telesur. Until we next see each other. And when we come back, we will be speaking about the United Arab Emirates, and if they're trying to get closer to Russia. And of course, he has on the list of the resistance of the Syrian people. And how much will it cost to Europe? That of course there's attack. Okay, we'll be analyzing this. We'll have a small pause and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Up until not so far away, they were firm allies of the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, but recently they've tried to get out of the conflict. This is a conflict that could damage the United Arab Emirates because they're neighboring to this country. The coasts of both countries are separated just by the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. This explains the declarations of the Emirate Foreign Affairs says that all of these tensions should be resolved through dialogue. We ask ourselves, for other actors, Russia, Europe, is there any closeness to Europe? The turn of the United Arab Emirates could change the balance of forces. It's important to see if it's an isolated group or it's a shift that will change in the next months. The truth is that the influence of Russia and the loss of the influence of the U.S. In June of 2018, United Arab Emirates signed an agreement with Russia where it says that they are interested in combat aircrafts and anti-missile crafts. Up until now, they have almost an exclusive buying all of the Russian weapons. It could also happen that President Trump and that this might just reinforce the shift of Emirates towards Putin. Let me present our new guests. Luis Agüero. He's a journalist in Venezuela. Thank you very much for taking your time. So United Arab Emirates withdrawals, but it's not total. And this partiality leaves us more curious of what's going on. Well, in first place, I think we have to think that the coalition that Saudi Arabia made with several countries of the world to control Yemen and control the hegemony of the Sunnites is now opened through the crisis since 2013 to 2015. They've lost all support from other embassies. However, now, this dilemma with respect of United Arab Emirates, let's not forget that they began to withdraw most of their forces, and now they only had military counselors, that they were going to counsel the rest of the forces that combat against the Yemenis. So what's happening is that he's just letting go the strategic analysts, and that's it. And apparently the strategy is being carried out. Now, why are they doing this? Why are they withdrawing? Well, due to two main factors. First, if they continue in this war against Yemen, United Nations have already had many pronunciations speaking about possible sanctions of human rights violations in their homes. And this just creates a shadow over this alliance to put back the government of Yemen in place. So what they want to do is just wash their face, so not to be sprinkled by all of the consequences of the war. Yeah, what they want to do is to liberate themselves from any sanction. And the second part of this, we would have to evaluate with the relationship with Saudi Arabia in the second aspect. They have lots of importance in the region, and they also have economic force in the region. So they also evaluate the exchange with other countries because they have strong commercial deals with Iran. And so Iran is basically Shiite. It has Shiite tendency. So there might be an agreement to reduce tensions on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, and then this agreement with Russia. So we have pivotal actors there. So there is an intention of United Arab Emirates to get closer to Russia. Well, they're reading into it very well. Far beyond the conflicts in the zone, they're trying to protect themselves as a country. So what they're trying to do is take care of their backs and wash their face. And when the time comes of the sanctions, who is basically affected would be Saudi Arabia. There is also a recognition of, not openly, but it is a failed war. There's a lot of pressure of every part of the world for the amount of dead people that this conflict is generating. Of course, what happened here is that there's a surprise element that they did not expect. They thought, they didn't know that the Houthis had so much capacity of war. Let's not forget that the war is outside of Yemen, and now it's affecting Saudi Arabia and of United Arab Emirates. So both military strategic points of the other countries have also been affected. So right now, carrying out a war where you have to combat it in enemy countries is totally different. And on the other hand, all of the dead people that have happened, it's because Saudi Arabia also has an interesting topic there. While more civilians have died, those are Shiites. And as long as the president dies, there will be more people reclaiming their right in the region. So this problem with Shiites and Sunnites was going to happen. What they did not expect, that there were going to be so much support and so much heavy weapons that Iran is sending to Iraq. No, they're very well equipped, very well trained, and they're defending their nation, their religion, and for their own people. Because let's not forget that this rebellion began because there was a government that was authoritarian. So another aspect that we must evaluate is that the regime implemented in Yemen, so Saudi Arabia comes in saying, for rebellion to be successful, and they need support. And if they have the support of the Saudi Arabias, then they could not go against them themselves. At their point, at some point there was a support of the Arab League, because let's not forget that they have this religion bond, that if a Sunni government says something, automatically all the rest will support it. And for United Nations, this must have a very high cost, because they've been working a lot but with no results. Obviously, the United Nations has to change the role in the world, because far beyond putting civilians at the sites to generate reports, what else do they do? Who respects United Nations? Because United Nations is practically respected by the third world countries. However, the strong powers, what they do is just there is not a system that will benefit the majority of the people. So United Nations elaborates reports that pretend to be sanctioned as sanctions, but they're not. So they have that table on the table that the United Nations poses no solution. And eventually we would like to see is that it is a real system of nations that come together. And what does Europe have to do? Well, Europe has been silent these past years, because let's recall that United Kingdom, France, supported this union of the Arab League. However, just recently they've taken back. They have stopped being news. They have stopped making publicity of their intervention in this conflict. So they're just awaiting to see what the results are and how the military forces come out. And they want to see if there's some stability in Yemen, and who's going to be successful. So we have to see how this plays out with the great powers. Thank you very much, Luis, for being with us in Jugada Crítica. Let's go to our conclusions. Once again, geography is a weapon of war. Let us read the political changes in the region. Each one begins to take care of their own back and to wash their own faces, just like our last analyst said. And if this is a war whose outcome will determine the immediate future of the oil trade, its exceptional geographic location gives it a primary strategic value in the reordering of the world crude oil traffic after the lifting of the sanctions to Iran. A coalition that, despite the preponderance of actors in the region, has been weakened because it did not expect to come face to face with the defensive and dissuasive capacity of the Houthi rebels. The pressure of the United Nations also comes into play since it cannot allow the tragedy to perpetuate. Europe is silent and expectant. Powerful Russia is ready for the shift in any alliance that may form. Well, this is how things are. Let's keep on analyzing. Thank you for being with us, and see you tomorrow.